a final lecture of the series. We've had a tremendous schus and merit to hear Professor Branover this past week. And so first and foremost, being that everybody is here now, I'd like to express a special yasher koyach, our feelings of gratitude to Professor Branover for coming here and sharing with us his insights and his beautiful lectures. Words really cannot describe how it has enlightened our minds and inspired our hearts and stirred our souls. And I usually mention at Yache Kala that the Rebbe a number of years ago answered a letter, a note, a zettel, which the organizers of Yache Kala had sent into the Rebbe asking for the Rebbe's bracha that there should be Hatzlacha Mufloga, outstanding success in Yache Kala. And the Rebbe responded with adding the word Bakoil, that there should be outstanding success in all aspects of Yache Kala. And then that the Rebbe added that B'yodoi HaKadoisha. And then he added also another few words, V'godoi l'schus Talmud Torah derabim. Great is the merit of communal public Torah learning. And as the scholar in residence at that time explained also a very interesting aspect, and this is a greater schus for all of us who have participated in Yache Kala, that especially when it's during holiday time, when many people prefer rather to just take time off and to do leisurely activities, but we take off our time from our holidays and come here to participate in communal Torah learning, how much more is this schus, how much greater is this schus, is this merit. And I'd like to say, Professor Branover, that schus harabim tolui boy, that in him, this great merit of communal Torah learning, especially in the topics that he discussed. So therefore I'd like to wish him, his wife, his family, much success in all their endeavors, in good health and happiness. And I also would like to express a yasher koyach to all other teachers who gave shiurim, both from the men and from the women. I don't want to go into detailed names, but everybody knows who they are. We express a very, very strong sense of gratitude to all those who gave of their time and their effort to give these beautiful shiurim. And to finish off, Hakol hoylech achar achitum, everything goes according to the end. And the Rebbe says that the way to accelerate the revelation of Moshiach, haderech ha'yeshara, is to learn aspects of Moshiach and Geula, Moshiach and redemption, and to live in a manner of redemption. So we have asked Professor Branover to give his view as a scientist of this call of the Rebbe to prepare for the imminent redemption. I'd also like to announce that that there are videos and tapes of previous lectures available in the foyer for sale. We have also made copies, which are free of charge, of those science and religion articles from the Newsweek and other magazines, which Professor Branover told us about in his first lecture, and they will be distributed after the lecture, and we probably will have to make more copies. There will probably be more of a demand, but we have the original. We can always make more copies. Professor Branover.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Groner, for the nice introduction. You said a number of nice things, but I think I have to add one point. The good news are that you will get rid of me today, finally, after a whole week, more than a week actually, from last Friday. 8 days, maybe it's too much. Anyway, we spoke about a number of subjects, dealt with a number of issues, number of aspects of Jewish life and philosophy. We spoke about modernity versus eternal Torah. We spoke about the uniqueness versus universality, two opposite trends in Jewish history. We spoke about tshuva versus assimilation, because the moment you stop making tshuva, immediately the assimilation is onset. And now we're coming to the central, pivotal issue of the entire universe. It's not only a Jewish theme, but it's the theme of the entire universe, and that is related to Moshiach and redemption, final redemption, Geula Shleima. Some people have a misconception that Chabad invented the issue of Mashiach. Well, advancing what I wanted to say later, it only shows that Chabad and the Rebbeim, and specifically our Rebbe, took upon themselves a mission to make the issue of Mashiach a real issue down to earth, issue of life, not a dream, not something which has to happen in unknown future times, but something which is going on already, which is tangible, which is the foundation of our lives. In that sense, maybe Chabad did invent, but the idea, the concept is deeply rooted from the very, very beginning. One can say that from the creation of the universe, from Adam Rishon, that's already on the agenda. Because that is the final goal, the Geula Shleima, the days of Mashiach is the final goal of creation. One probably can say that this world, the creation of the world, creation of the man, is a gigantic experiment which the Creator did, introducing a man who is possessing free will into this world, which is far from being perfect. The world is having good and evil, light and darkness, all the opposites. And in the midst of that, there is a man who have to make, using his ability to make the choices, ability to exercise his free will, the man has to make proper choices. And the ultimate goal, of course, the Creator, if we make an experiment in a laboratory, if I do it in my laboratory, for instance, I never know the outcome. I can guess, I can have some hypothesis, but the experiment is done for the purpose to find what the answer will be, what the result will be. Not this is a case with a divine experiment, because God transcends, as we spoke several times over the last week, time and space. Therefore, for him, future and past and present is all the same. And of course, he knows and designs all this that in such a way that he knows what the outcome will be. And he knows, and that is an element of the design of the world, of the creation, that ultimately light will win over darkness, good deeds will win and overcome and conquer the evil, and so on, and that will be a different world with light and justice and good deeds. But when it will happen exactly and how it will happen depends very much on human beings, on how they exercise a free will. As a matter of fact, more than 3,300 years ago, Moshe Rabbeinu, in the end of Chumash Dvorim, speaks about Geula, about the future world, and that is revealing that the Geula from Egypt, from Mitzrayim, was not the final, was not the Geula Shleima, was not the Geula after which there is no more Golos. It was a release from slavery, it was a Geula, but it was not the final Geula. And Moshe Rabbeinu speaks about the future Geula, which will be the final one. So the concept is at least as old as 3,300 as the Sinai revelation. As everybody knows, prophet Yirmiyahu was even called sometimes the prophet of the Geula, the prophet of Moshiach, because he already described it in every detail. He spoke about Moshiach, who has to come from Beis David, from the descendants of David HaMelech, from King David. Even according to the Jerusalem Talmud, according to the view of Rabbi Akiva, even Bilam, the prophet who was on the other side, the non-Jewish prophet, the prophet who was hired to curse the Jewish people, but he couldn't, and he blessed the Jews, actually in his blessing he speaks about days of Mashiach. And of course, closer to our time, but still quite distant, more than 800 years ago, the Rambam writes in his main book, in Yad HaChazokah, in his Halacha book, describes in every possible detail, although he makes a statement that after all, the hidden about days of Mashiach is greater than disclosed, even to such a giant as Rambam was. But nevertheless, he gives quite a number of details and the definitions and so on. But most important, that in his 13 principles of faith, he puts one of the principles is believing in Mashiach and expecting Mashiach and waiting for Mashiach every day. And the second point he makes is regarding resurrection of the dead, regarding Tchias HaMeisim. And he makes a conclusion, a very sharp and very strong conclusion, that whoever is believing in the coming of Mashiach and not actually eagerly waiting for Mashiach every day, it's as if he would be rejecting the entire Torah. So that shows that this is the ultimate goal of the creation of the universe, of everything. That counts and weighs more than all the rest of the Torah. So in view of that very, very brief survey, of course it was a very superficial and very, very short one, but it's absolutely clear that Chabad didn't invent, but Chabad put a very special accent on the implementation of everything which relates to Mashiach and Geula. And that is felt very well in the fundamental book of Chabad Chassidim of the Alter Rebbe in the Tanya. And one can say that the main and pivotal purpose of the Chabad movement for 7 generations of the Rebbes always was to materialize the Geula, to bring about the Geula, to prepare the world for Geula. And the more time passed, the more imminent the inyan of Geula was becoming. And it came to its height, to its culmination in our time, in our generation, in the generation of the 7th Rebbe, of our Rebbe. As we discussed here quite a number of times, the Rebbe has miraculous accomplishments. First of all, bringing to Tshuva, bringing closer to Torah, thousands and thousands and thousands of Jews, and not only Jews, but lahavdil non-Jews, also through 7 mitzvahs b'nei Neach and so on. You can mention capturing of the entire universe, of the entire globes, all 5 continents, through institutions of Chabad, through Chabad emissaries. But and I could go on counting other accomplishments, the time is simply too short. All that, as the Rebbe himself explains, is only a preparation for the main goal, for the main accomplishment, which is imminent, which is extremely close, closer than ever, the coming of Mashiach. It's only a preparation, it's only a way, with all the importance of all those deeds. And the Rebbe stresses that it's absolutely must happen, will happen, in the lifetime of our 7th generation. The statement is made hundreds of times, non-equivocally, and full and absolute promise. I mentioned that the Rebbe changed lives of millions of people, literally millions. We once made a rough assessment, a calculation, how many people till now have been in contact with the Rebbe in different ways. Either there have been some people who have been privileged to spend many hours in the room of the Rebbe, on Yechidus. There have been others who spend many, many hours in Verbrengens, listening to the discourses of the Rebbe in front of several thousand people. Still others who have been corresponding with the Rebbe, getting faxes from the Rebbe, and many, many those who never saw the Rebbe but have been in contact through the emissaries, through Chabad Shluchim, all over the world, all over the globe. And there have been those who followed the instructions of the Rebbe even on their own, besides Shluchim, because they read a public letter, which was printed in the paper, or got information otherwise what the Rebbe is demanding, what the Rebbe put on the agenda, and they decided to follow it, to implement it. Certainly, nobody can say how many people, but it's not spoken about thousands, it's not spoken about tens or hundreds of thousands, it goes in many, many millions, probably in tens of millions of people who have been directly implementing, and when I say several tens of millions, that of course includes also Goyim, because nobody knows, as a matter of fact, as nobody knows how many Jews are in the Soviet Union, and actually the number of Jews in the Soviet Union, exactly as the Rebbe predicted years ago, is now growing. Jews are emigrating from there, but the number of those who remain is growing. That's not a miraculous event. We spoke about many miraculous events which cannot be understood from the point of view of science and rational thinking, but here in this case it's simply Jews who have been hiding themselves, and now they are coming out of hiding and reinstall their registration as Jews. So, but altogether, no doubt that the Rebbe reaches out to several tens of millions, maybe more. And of course, in some degree, because it's spoken that if somebody made a mitzvah, made a positive movement in the spirit of Torah, it's already he is influenced and dominated by the Rebbe's teaching. And such people can be found all over the globe. Sometimes they even themselves don't know that they are doing something which the Rebbe is demanding because they heard it second, third hand, and so on. Many of those people know from personal experience how the instructions or the forecasts or the prophecies for the Rebbe are materializing in their own lives. Sometimes immediately, sometimes with a delay of several years, sometimes with a delay of many years. And to illustrate that, I will permit myself to dedicate a few minutes again to a few personal stories. I apologize for introducing personal stories in a lecture about such an important person, but again, personal experience, of course, are most convincing, not only for the person who experienced them, but also for others to whom he is telling. So I already told here in one of the previous lectures that I left the Soviet Union 26 years ago only thanks to the blessing, to the bracha of the Rebbe, which I got in a non-conventional way over the telephone. And I explained to you that according to the ruling of the authorities then, they decided that I have to sit there at least 10, maybe 20 years and wait till I will forget everything I researched in my scientific work. And that was a very, very dark perspective for me, because they have been putting me in jail every few days or every few weeks. And then when I got a bracha from the Rebbe over the phone, the Rebbe told that very soon I will be released, despite their desire, despite their mighty powers, their police, KGB, secret police and open police and army and military forces, the fact that they could do to me and to many other Jews as myself whatever they wanted. Nevertheless, it was in years when emigration was very rare, and in my case it was absolutely hopeless because my connection to military secrets. And nevertheless, against all this background, the Rebbe gives a bracha, and I'm receiving in 3 weeks permission to leave. And I don't want now to spend time in telling the details, but when I got the permission, there have been clear evidence that they are doing it against their own will. It was obvious from their behavior that something is pushing them. They don't even know clearly what's happening. And nevertheless, the will and the influence of the Rebbe is higher than nature, higher than individual desires of people, and they are doing that. If time would permit, I could tell you many other stories, how the Rebbe determined practically everything what happened to me in life. When I came from Russia to Israel, and I didn't have a laboratory, I couldn't establish a laboratory similar to what I had in Russia, because in Russia all the equipment is given, at that time was given at least by the government. In Israel, you have to find funds. As a matter of fact, that's maybe one advantage of communist Russia over free world, because scientists are given everything they need. The government is taking care. In the free world, scientist has to spend 90% of his time in writing proposals, and then most of the proposals for research are rejected, and sometimes he is very happy he gets a governmental grant. So in my case, that was made very easy, because soon after we arrived to Israel, I went, of course, to see the Rebbe, to New York, and one of the things the Rebbe did, he directed me to go somewhere, real Baal Shem story. When the Rebbe, I told this story yesterday at a different occasion, but I cannot repeat it, it would be too long. The Rebbe instructed me to go somewhere in Philadelphia to look up a certain scientist. The Rebbe didn't give a name. I found the scientist after searching a whole day, and this scientist invited me to come to present a lecture somewhere in California. Still, I didn't know the importance of that. I even rejected the invitation. But the Rebbe wrote me that it's very important, that I should accept it, and I went there, and suddenly I was met there with 2 representatives of the American Navy who came specially to see me, to offer me a contract. And I had an 8-year-long contract from the American Navy, where I got a lot of money to build one of the best laboratories in the world in my field. That's how I got the possibility to work, and we even did in this laboratory several inventions and several interesting and practical developments and so on and so forth. And when we did those developments, again, the Rebbe interfered with our research, with results of our inventions, and maybe this story I will tell you a little bit more in detail, because it shows how the Rebbe masters the world in all respects, all areas. We made an invention, registered patents. I happily reported about this invention and this development in many universities in Europe, in America. Everybody was admiring the new system we invented and what it can do. And then I had a private appointment with the Rebbe and Yechidus, and the Rebbe asked me to tell him about the new invention. When I made a very, very short 2-3 sentences statement, the Rebbe wasn't satisfied. He smiled and told me that he wants to hear a lecture similar to what I am giving at universities, at the seminar. So, of course, I was very confused, because you can imagine to stand in front of the great tzaddik and suddenly start talking about flows of liquid metals, two-phase flows, magnetic fields, all this nonsense. What has to do with the valuable, precious time of a tzaddik? But if the Rebbe is saying you to do, you have to do. And I gave some 20-30 minutes long lecture in the presence in the front of Rebbe, quoting by orally all the equations, because the Rebbe's room doesn't have a blackboard, so I couldn't write equations. And when I finished all this presentation, the Rebbe gave me an endorsement. Yes, the invention is good, it can work, and it will be successful. But the Rebbe mentioned, if you would operate your device in a different mode, and he immediately explained in detail how we should operate this device, it can be 40-50% more efficient. And the great surprise was, of course, not that the Rebbe gives such an advice, because I knew at that time already what the powers of the Rebbe are, but I couldn't understand how all those dozens of experts who have been listening to my presentations in dozens of universities, no one of them, supposedly the best experts in the world in this field, working day and night in this field, nobody made this remark, nobody made this suggestion. I had to get to the Lubavitcher Rebbe himself to get advice in details of research, in details of engineering development. And the second point the Rebbe made was even more strange and more unexpected. The Rebbe told the two numbers, incidentally it was the velocity of a two-phase flow and the efficiency of the system. I mentioned in my presentation many numbers, but the Rebbe picked up two of them and told those two numbers don't correspond to each other, don't fit each other. There should be a mistake. And of course I couldn't answer anything. I only was uttering something that we developed the theory. We used the theory on the mainframe computer, on the big computer of the university. It's a very complicated computation. Every computation lasted at that time, now it will be maybe a little shorter, but at that time it lasted 45 minutes just to make one result. And the Rebbe gave a bright white smile and told, okay, you are the expert, I'm supposed to believe you, but for me those two numbers should be wrong. And then after I went home, I immediately ordered all my assistants and PhD students to start working hard and check every calculation and every detail of the theory, and there was no mistake. And the second time, and again we couldn't find a mistake. It took 2 years. 2 years later, a new PhD student who just started working in my laboratory found that one of the terms in one of the equations was written erroneously, and that of course caused a discrepancy in the results. And we, the authors of the theory and those who make calculations, we needed 2 years to find where the mistake was. The Rebbe made this statement on the spot. He didn't use a computer, obviously. He didn't use even a pencil or a piece of paper. In a fraction of a second, through his vision from above, vision through the elevated world, through the world of Torah, gives immediate answer. I should also mention that the Rebbe prophetically predicted the collapse of communism back in 1985. In April of 1985, 2 or 3 days after Gorbachev came to the office in the Kremlin in Moscow, the Rebbe told me to phone whoever I can in Moscow and Leningrad and instruct them, encourage them, tell them that from now on the situation will improve. Those who will desire to leave will be able to leave Russia. Those who want to lead a Jewish life in Russia will be able to do so. But the Rebbe added that it will not be immediate, it will take several years, but it certainly will happen. And when I, with great effort, reached some 10 or 12 people in different cities, mainly in Moscow and Leningrad, they felt difficult to accept this encouragement. Of course, those have been people who knew about the Rebbe and they evaluated the interest in them which the Rebbe expressed, and they evaluated even more the prediction of the Rebbe. But one told me that my wife was taken to the KGB 2 days ago and she never yet came back, and I'm terribly, terribly worried. I don't know what happened to her. And of course, he says, if the Rebbe says it's wonderful, but we don't see it in reality. And another one told me that a car of the KGB is standing at his doorstep and recording everything we're talking now. And I reported to the Rebbe and I got an answer, written answer. The Rebbe wrote, yes, the process started, but it's not yet seen. You cannot see it. Call them again if you can and encourage them again. It certainly will happen. It will happen in a few years from now. And that's what happened, as we know. I still keep at home the papers of New York of that day, New York Times, New York Post and others. Huge headlines, the situation in Russia is getting worse. Exactly the opposite what the Rebbe was saying. The greatest expert in the Soviet regime, in communism, predicted that with coming of Gorbachev, the situation will become worse and worse, and wrote long articles, very clever articles with a lot of terminology, analysis, and so on. We see what it was worth ultimately. And later on, when I had the chance to speak to Gorbachev, and he was already out of presidency of Russia and became a private person, and he visited Israel, he made some fundraising for himself, for the Gorbachev Fund. And my university was so stupid to pay him $70,000 for one lecture. But that's not the point. The point is that I told him the story. I told him that the Lubavitcher Rebbe predicted everything which will happen in Russia back in April, beginning of April 1985. And the first few minutes he was absolutely shocked and couldn't say a word. Then he came up with a categorical denial. He told me it's impossible. You know why it's impossible, he says? Because in April 85, I just started my work. I didn't have a slightest idea what I'm going to do. And he says, I know a little bit about Chabadniks. They probably could intrude my office and steal my plans if there would be something to steal. But in April 85, there was nothing even in my head, he says. And a year later or 2 years later, he says, I had a plan, but in reality, what happened in reality was very different from my plan, because he wanted to keep the communist regime intact. He just wanted to beautify it a little bit to get support from the West. But he miscalculated. So a goy doesn't even have a plan in his head. Then later he has a plan, but it goes the other way around. The Rebbe knows it all in advance. If that is not clear prophecy, then I don't know what prophecy is. It's not a clever prediction. You cannot say, okay, the Rebbe is a great genius, he put together all the data. We know that with the data, the specialists in the newspapers wrote exactly the opposite. The Rebbe has higher sources of information. So taking all that in account, and of course, I'm sure that many of those who are sitting in this room could add many stories which they could tell about their own experiences. And if you go all over the world, you will get hundreds of thousands such stories which show the abilities of the Rebbe to predict future and to make a prophecy about the future and so on. Against this background, we have to recognize that it's an absolute clear must that everything the Rebbe is saying about Mashiach, about Geula, must materialize, must go exactly as the Rebbe predicts. And what is the Rebbe saying? And repeatedly, the Rebbe is speaking about Mashiach more than about any other subject, more than about any other issue. And the main points are that Mashiach is already here. If the previous Rebbe was saying that we have to make just the very easy last preparations to polish the buttons, as he put it, referring to a habit in the Russian army, our Rebbe teaches us that Mashiach is already here and all preparations have been finished. There's no need in more preparation and more waiting. We have to just recognize and just to receive, to be able to mekabel pnei Mashiach tzidkenu. And the Rebbe says that we have to learn how to open our eyes and recognize Mashiach. And the Rebbe says that everyone has to do whatever he can to accelerate the revelation of Mashiach. And the Rebbe explains, of course, what does it mean, whatever he can. First of all, to learn about Mashiach, to learn to the depths, to spread the knowledge, disseminate the knowledge, and to speak about Mashiach, and to live the issue of Mashiach. And in addition, of course, with the idea of Mashiach in mind, to intensify whatever can be done in spreading other mitzvahs, but spreading them specifically with a purpose, having in mind that that's done in any time. We have to spread mitzvahs, and everybody knows about the 10 mitzvahs of the Rebbe and so on, but it has to be done with a special feeling and special emotion regarding acceleration of the coming of the revelation of Mashiach. And more than anything else, of course, it has to be related to the main mitzvah, to Ahavas Yisrael. We have to exclude categorically any hatred, any rivals, and do everything to spread and strengthen Ahavas Yisrael, Ardus Yisrael, unity. And the Rebbe also mentions that at least a million of Jews, but preferably many, many more, should make literally the inyan of Mashiach, the issue of Mashiach, foundation of their lives. The purpose of their lives should be to do everything, to spend all their time in activities related to the acceleration, to making the revelation of Mashiach more imminent. So we, of course, taking all that in account, should be absolutely confident, have a full confidence, full bitochen, that it's going to happen very, very soon. It is hopefully going to happen the next second, the next hour. And if one asks my own view and my own feeling, I personally, of course, believe that I know exactly the identity of Mashiach. For me, it's absolutely clear. My personal view is that Mashiach is nobody else but our Rebbe Melech Mashiach, because I tend to accept literally what the Rebbe says every time, and especially if he himself says that it's done in a prophetic vision. And in prophetic vision he says that it's going to happen during this lifetime, and the Mashiach has to be from this seventh generation, and therefore the natural response, knowing everything of the Rebbe, is of course that I personally expect that the Rebbe will come in the capacity of King Mashiach. For a number of additional reasons. The most obvious reasons are that everybody, those who are belonging to Chabad and those who are distant from Chabad, know that in this generation there is simply nobody who comes even close to the profoundness of the Torah teaching of the Rebbe, profoundness of the Torah knowledge of the Rebbe, of mitzvahs, but more than anything less in implementation of Torah, in spreading Torah, in bringing Jews, in saving Jews, saving Jewish lives literally, and saving Jewish lives as Jews. Never before, we spoke about millions of people who have been influenced, never before, as much as we know history, anything of such scale happened. And we know about the ability of the Rebbe not only to foresee future, but also to determine future, which is something much higher. We can't understand. It's not for us simple Jews to be able to explain how does the Rebbe act, but no doubts that the Rebbe was more than instrumental in bringing down the Soviet regime in the Soviet Union, the same as the Alter Rebbe in his time was instrumental in bringing down Napoleon in his war against Russia, because the Alter Rebbe was writing that for the sake of Yiddishkeit, for the sake of Torah, it's absolutely vital that Russia would conquer, despite that the Russian regime, the Tsar, was a very brutal regime and did a lot of problems to Jews. Regarding the certainty of the Geula and revelation of Mashiach, there are also some points directly related to science, and permit me to use a few more minutes to describe you what the points are. There is a direct connection between the number of things we discussed in the lectures dedicated to modern science and absence of conflicts and main points of philosophy of science in our time. Let me very briefly refer to them. It's true that some people, and I'm not criticizing anybody else, I'm speaking about myself, I'm just sharing with you my own feeling and my own problems. It's difficult, very difficult, sometimes even impossible, to visualize, to comprehend rationally with our mind everything which relates to Mashiach. It's difficult to visualize and have the rational understanding how suddenly the door is opening and the Rebbe Melech Mashiach is coming in and leading us to Yerushalayim. Only the Rebbe has this degree of belief and faith, and he expressed it at numerous occasions. An ordinary Jew, it's very difficult. And what hinders the ability to be on this level? Mainly the importance we attribute to our own understanding, to our rational mind. And now we see that in sciences, this day, the sciences and philosophers of science are recognizing the same difficulty. Why did Einstein dispute with Niels Bohr 30 years? Huge number of days and hours spent for disputing, for refuting a thing which he himself invented. He invented first, experimentally discovered quantum physics, and he was disputing for 30 years in writing hundreds of pages that no, it couldn't be true, because the mind is protesting. But with all his greatness, Einstein, as opposed to Niels Bohr, did not have the ability to grasp the simple fact that science already penetrated an area into God's creation when mind is helping very little. We make an experiment, we find results, we process them, and we have to use them for practical applications. The mind says not, it's impossible. It's impossible that I would, with my vision, with my observation, change nature of an electron, of another particle of matter. It doesn't make sense, but we accept it because otherwise we cannot build electronic equipment and lasers and so on. It's a very, very direct resemblance with what's going. The difference is also that if even in material things and physical things our mind is too weak, so who am I to pretend that I can visualize and understand the highest inyonim, the highest issues related to Mashiach and Geula? And that corresponds exactly to what the Rabbeim are saying, who is, those who are using and reading every day the very small but very important Sefer Yem Yem, knows that yesterday it was a quotation from the Rebbe Rashab, who said that in our time of very close, in his time it was also already close, not as close as now, the coming of Mashiach, the worst thing is to rely on Tam V'das, on rational mind, on rational understanding. We have to go by simple belief, by Munah Pshuta. There are many things related to advanced stages of Geula which are also discovered by science. And there is one thing which the Rambam puts as, in addition to the expectation and to the anticipation of coming of Mashiach, which is one of the principles, he also puts as a separate principle, believe in Trias Amesim. And I already told you, I even gave here, I think they made copies of the article, of the book, which is entirely dedicated to the question that science is recognizing resurrection of the dead. Also a remarkable fact. In addition, there are many, many scientific results which are showing that the civilization, mankind on Earth, simply doesn't have any future, any hope without the Geula, for purely physical reasons, not spiritual. Because there are so many threats. We spoke at length here about global warming, but there is also holes in the ozone layer. There is also the threat that mankind accumulated tremendous amounts of nuclear radioactive waste. And nobody, they put it 5 kilometers deep in the earth, it still pops out, and this waste can survive, as calculations show, for millions of years. Well, we don't speak about millions of past, we speak about millions of future. And people are doing practically very little or nothing, because to cope with this problem, you need a different attitude. You need to re-educate the entire mankind. And that is impossible. That can be only when the earth will be full of knowledge of Torah, as the Rambam is quoting, and that's only after coming of Moshiach. So altogether, of course, it's difficult when we speak about Mashiach and Rebbe Melech Mashiach. It's very difficult to visualize. It's very difficult to use our mind. But more by feelings and by rational thinking, we know for sure that the Rebbe is with us. A lady yesterday asked me why I'm using present tense. Yes, I deliberately use present tense because I feel, and thousands of other people worldwide feel, that the Rebbe is with us, he's guiding us, he's leading us, he's making our activities successful. We're getting answers in different ways, including the answers through Iyar's Kaddish, just putting a question, a letter with questions into the Rebbe's book of letters, collection of his letters to different people. How it works, why it works, again, if you want to have a rational explanation, you will get into endless arguments, the same as Einstein got into a 30-year argument, which was a waste of time. He could do something better. You have to accept fact. It works. Why? It's not our ability to explain. It's a fact, unfortunately, a very painful fact, that already too long, several years, we don't see our Rebbe physically with our physical eyes, but we know he is with us, he is leading us. First of all, one has to say that a life of a tzaddik is under any circumstances very little a physical life like our lives. We are first of all physical creatures. Then we have also a neshama and we have a seichel, and we try to be more spiritual through learning Torah and implementing Torah. But with the tzaddik, it's a different way. The tzaddik's life, tzaddik is almost not eating, almost not sleeping, and doesn't have anything. His private interest doesn't exist. So it's a difference in the first place. And therefore, when people are asking, how can it happen? You are saying something absolutely insane, impossible. My answer is, we have to have also a little bit confidence in the ability of the designer and the creator. HaKadosh Baruch Hu probably knows, if he knew how to create the world in the first place, he knows how to accomplish this task. How? It's not our business, because in the first place we could never understand and will never understand how he creates worlds and how he accomplishes. Anyway, the revelation of Mashiach has to be the greatest miracles. The Rebbe is always saying, we had plenty of miracles, victories in Israel, collapse of the Soviet regime, many other things, but the greatest miracle, the miracle, unfortunately, still didn't happen. It will happen very soon, but this moment it didn't happen. We're still in Golos. Next moment, hopefully, it will happen. And I'm saying, let's just give a little bit credit to HaKadosh Baruch Hu that he will know how to do it. There is one more point where sciences are resembling the Torah and in the Mashiach issue. I referred quite a lot to quantum physics and to the fact that observation is not only changing nature, not only changing the physical world, but also is bringing it into existence. That without observation, some people had difficulties. I got many questions and people argued with me. I couldn't help, because that's just a logical conclusion from experiments. You can't help it. That's how it is. That scientifically, without observation, a physical object does not exist without being observed by a human being. So I can drive a very interesting parallel. When Jews are reciting Yechi Adonenu Morenu Rabbeinu Melech HaMashiach Le'olam Va'ed, that's something we say from the bottom of our heart with a lot of emotion, feeling, and of course presenting to our internal vision to whom we refer, because if we just abstract without referring to anybody specifically say it, it's hanging in the air. It doesn't have the foundation on which to be based. But if we say it with all those conditions, that probably, it's again, I'm saying it just as a b'derech hefsher, that is fulfilling in a sense the same role as observation is fulfilling when it brings into existence an electron, a photon, and so on. We accelerate, we give more power to Melech HaMashiach. And if we do it collectively, many Jews, and if it's based on our well-prepared activities through strengthening mitzvahs, strengthening Torah life, helping other Jews, having Ahavas Yisrael, then certainly it has to have its impact. By having said that, I have only to express my hope, I hope it's everybody's hope and the prayer, that our deeds would really be permeated with the spirit of Ahavas Yisrael and would be accepted, fruitful, and that the Rebbe Melech HaMashiach would lead us to Yerushalayim to build the third Beis HaMikdash very, very soon, preferably next few seconds or minutes at least. Thank you very much. Well, we have time for a few questions. I exceeded again. I apologize. I did it at most of my lectures, but I was carried away with the subject. No questions? Yes. Speak up a little bit. I couldn't hear you. I'm sorry.
Your experience, you traveled around the world.
Yes.
You've seen a lot of things. What do you say today would be one of the main signs, pointing out of all the different signs you've drawn, what is the most blatant sign in today's day and age pointing to the Gula amongst all the things that you've mentioned?
Well, if I would know what is the most important, I would say it right away. Who am I who could make preference that this is the main sign, this is a... We have a lot of signs, and the longer we go and more we search and more we look around, we see more and more manifestations, but I wouldn't venture. I'm not pretending to be a Talmid Chacham. I didn't have I wasn't fortunate to study in yeshiva ever. Unfortunately, I picked up a little bit Yiddishkeit during nights from my friends. So I really would prefer not to express my views that this is more important. I think everything is important and everything helps. Any other questions? Yes. Well, exactly. If we will make the right choices as God wants us and begs us that we should do, it will happen sooner. So the ultimate goal is known. God will not let his experiment to fail, because he is in the future the same as he is in the past and in the present, and he knows what his desires are. But when it will happen, that depends on us, and that's what I spoke about, that we have to exercise our free will in a positive sense and intensify our good deeds, and that should accelerate it. That's what the Rebbe is teaching us. Well, that's one of the ingredients, yes. No, the Geula has to do with Goyim also, because the Rebbe is giving a very great importance to the 7 mitzvahs of Bnei Noach. They should know that those are not just good deeds for them, but there are deeds which are prescribed by our Torah through Moshe Rabbeinu. That's the point, that they would appreciate. Maybe the best of them are doing it anyway, but they should appreciate that what they're doing is because it's a mitzvah given by the Creator through Moshe Rabbeinu. I think you had another question. Maybe that's the last one because we're absolutely running out of time and I'm running out of schedule also. I have to travel. Well, difficult questions, but I think the best answer is if I wouldn't make this statement. What? The questions have been why do I accept and believe, and whether I have proofs that avodas habirurim has been completed, and what the second question was, what does it actually mean to open your eyes and recognize Moshiach? I think that in both we have to rely on our Rebbe, because that's him who made the statement, and I trust that he has enough reasons to make the statement that avodas habirurim is completed. And if we do know, everyone knows about birurim, and everybody has his own birurim and the collective birurim, but to say to which degree it's completed and so, we need the Rebbe to judge. We cannot judge. And open your eyes. Well, the Rebbe is saying that the more we learn and the more we dedicate ourselves and our lives and our time and our energy and emotion to Moshiach, we are more prepared to be able to find and to see. You can look and not see anything if you are not trained. You know, again, in science, you have examples when you are looking day and night, you are seeing nothing. Then a more trained and more experienced scientist is coming and he sees what you never could see. Okay, thank you very much. I wish everybody here personal happiness and Psuras Teves.